Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. If we haven't had the chance to meet before, I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit. And I've learned from a friend at the Hangout that it's helpful for me to actually let people know that Posit is the company formerly called our studio. And we build enterprise solutions and open source tools for people who do data science with R and Python. And Libby, I'll have you introduce yourself too.
I am Libby. I help out with customer community and the Hangout over here at Posit. And I'm also a Posit Academy mentor. I help people learn R and Python to help them work with data better in their jobs. And I am a avid sewer and reader and watcher of science fiction things.
Love it. I'll try and add that in next time, Libby. That's a good call. Happy to have you all joining us today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across all different industries, to chat about data science leadership and connect with others facing similar things as you. And we get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube and you want to join us live in the future, there'll be details below to add it to your own calendar. I just want to say thank you to those who have helped make this the friendly and welcoming space that it is today. And we're all dedicated to keeping it that way. So if you ever have feedback about your experience that you'd like to share with me anonymously, good or bad, or maybe suggestions for topics to dive deeper on, I'm going to share a Google form in the chat with you right now. You can always reach out to me directly as well if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, but that form is anonymous too. At the Hangout, we love hearing from you no matter your years of experience, your titles, industry, or languages that you work in.
And we really encourage you to connect with other attendees here at the Hangout in the chat. So introduce yourself, say hello, say what you do, where you're based, what you like to do for fun, and definitely share your LinkedIn profile or your website URL as well, so people can find you afterwards. And there are 3 ways to jump in and ask questions today, because this is a community question powered conversation. We really, really want you to ask questions. You can raise your hand on Zoom. We will call on you to jump in live. You can put questions in the Zoom chat. And if you can't ask them yourself, if maybe your mic doesn't work or you're somewhere loud, feel free to just put an asterisk next to it so that we will read it for you. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously. So you can see in the chat, Isabella just put that link there to Slido. And with that, I am so excited today to introduce our co-host, which is Nechama Katan from Pfizer. She's the Director of Innovative Data Analytics. And Nechama, I would love for you to get started by just telling us a little bit about you, what you do, and what you like to do outside of work.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. I've known about this Connect for a while, and I'm excited to talk to all of you and to get kind of your feedback as well and what these works. So I work in the clinical trial data space, and my role is coming up with technical solutions and mentoring people around data cleaning, particularly for space monitoring, which is a statistical process to control data coming out of clinical trials. Outside of work, I have a number of hats I wear. I have way too many children, literally. And I also do a lot of creative type of stuff. So woodworking, fixing up houses, remodeling kitchens. This week I'm crocheting hats. So show you a hat. I have a friend who unfortunately passed away of cancer recently. Hats. And she used to crochet hats to donate to homeless shelters and other types of support groups. And so I'm making hats in her honor and in her memory. It's a Jewish tradition to do things to keep people's memories alive. So the hats are all for Cindy Bailey. So that's kind of who I am. Where I came from, I have undergraduate degrees in math and undergraduate in math, graduate in math, and graduate in statistics. From New York schools, and then ended up at Intel because I was living on the West Coast where I did process control in their factories and performance analysis. I bounced around a number of different industries, but kind of my common theme in my career has been helping people use their data, be it manufacturing data, banking data, pharmaceutical data. In my case, I was a financial advisor for a while. I'm fascinated by why it is that people have data and then don't use it, myself included, right? We all know how to be rich and thin, and we don't do it, right? So I'm as interested in the analysis as I am interested in how do you present analysis in a way that action will actually happen. So I spend a lot of time trying to think about that and why is it that people are so adverse to looking at data and to understanding it.
I love it. How did you make the leap from university to data? What was your sort of like initial thought process in I want to go into data, or did this kind of creep up on you?
So let me start with how I ended up as a math major. My mother was a philosopher. I didn't want to do the hard sciences. I was told I couldn't write because I had learning disabilities, so there went all the humanities, and I didn't like physics. So, and computer science was, because of the learning disabilities, was outside of my scope. Prior to modern computer environments where everything is color coded, if you don't read syntax, you can't code. So I'm old enough that a VI editor and I were not friends. So I ended up in math by default. I think I'm the only person in the world who ended up with a theoretical math degree because it was the only thing I could figure out how I could get through. I got kicked out of graduate school because of those children I mentioned. They told me I wasn't sufficiently focused. And in Portland, where I landed, Intel was the largest was the largest employer. In graduate school, because I went to Columbia, I actually got a statistics degree and had seen one data set with 20 rows of data in it. So I learned data on the fly because I needed a job. I called up hiring managers. I called up three hiring managers a week off an Intel listing that I gotten from an internal source and talked until someone said, "Oh, you can do statistics, come do process control." And I said, "Okay." So lots of just kind of what happened. And then I've stayed in data because it's fascinating to me. It speaks to me and I can do it.
Thank you. Well, Nechama, I was wondering to get us started here as well, if you could tell us a little bit about the concept of relevant analytics and what it means.
Yeah. So it's easy to do analytics, right? You take a bunch of data and we've all done that. You open up a raw data, a data set, and you're like, oh, cool, I can take a standard deviation, I can take a descriptive statistic, I can plot it, I can do all sorts of stuff. And then the question is, okay, great, now what? And I'll give an example from Intel. Years ago, I did a cool 3D model of transistor density on Intel and competitive chips. Looked beautiful. It was in math, in a cool graphing software. It looked like a city. And someone looked at me and said, "So what am I going to do with this?" The answer is, "I don't know." And a lot of analytical people say that. They say, "Well, I don't know. Just it's data. Go do something with it." Um, I am really focused now on kind of the concept that technology on its own doesn't do you any good. I hate to say it, you guys can write the best app on the planet. It can make coffee, it can do everything anyone ever wants. But if it doesn't answer an actual business question, it's not going to help. So what typically happens in most data spaces is that people spend all this money on this technology, nobody knows how to use it, and then the fact that no one uses it gets blamed on bad change management. And well, the users didn't want to change, right? Some of you guys are on video, nod your heads, right? You've heard this, right? If the users would just use it, it would have fixed all their problems. And the users won't use it because it's about 80% correct. In most cases, if you're really, really, really good and you're not talking to end users every single day, you're going to be at best 80% relevant. And that's not enough for them to make business decisions. So I'm talking about a model nowadays of start with business context. So what are the business questions that the business needs to answer? And then what are the data that actually supports those questions, not the data that you can get. So let me give an example from a conversation I had with someone outside of work. A call center asked a question: how many consecutive calls do you have? How many contiguous calls? How many calls do you have at the same time? Right? Because they needed to know how many call center employees to have. So the data people gave them what? They gave them the average duration of a call. So, right, how many calls do you have in 15 minutes? How many calls come in 15 minutes? Was actually, I think, what they were given, because that was what was easy to pull out of the data warehouse. But the number of calls that come in 15 minutes on a call center didn't capture the long tail, the extremely long calls that were for customers who were stuck someplace and desperately needed to talk to someone. So they hired the wrong number of call center people. And the business was now in a problem because they couldn't meet the customer needs, right? They had a great answer to the wrong problem. So that's an example of understanding the problem. And I've been in multiple business situations where someone will say, hey, here's the question I have. And then they go back and forth and back and forth. But really, the data people just say, here's the data we have. Can't you use our data to answer that question? And the answer is no. The answer is no. That question isn't going to answer what the business needs. And it doesn't help if that's easy data to get to. You have to then figure out how to get the right data to answer those questions, and then be really transparent to your business about what question you are answering, because people's livelihoods and the business is at stake based off bad analysis. So that's kind of this concept of how do you do business relevant? You need to understand what are the questions and prioritize them. Not all questions are as important. You need to understand why that question was important, right? If this was about hiring call centers employees so that a business that in this particular case meeting customer needs when things went bad was critically important to people. It wasn't, oh, you could wait 2 weeks. No, and that wasn't an answer. You needed to understand why that question was important as well. So you have to know the priority and know what your data is. Once you've got your highest priority questions, you answer the highest priority question for which you have data first, and then you build a data pipeline to put in all the other data that you need.
I love it. I think this follows on to something I've heard you say before, which is actually that you believe business people can outperform programmers because they have, most of the time, because they have that background, that understanding of the question. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I love computer science programmers who can program. The challenge is that if I take a consultant, let's take a consultant rather than a generic full-time programmer. So if I take a consultant who's working in my environment, and I throw a problem at them, I need to give them every single little detail. So in a call earlier today, someone was like, oh, I've got 3 data files. And they asked the data lake guy for access to the data in the data files. And the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. These are end system files. Some of them were manually made up by the business. So he's off asking questions that don't make any sense. In my experience, if I have a business person or a business curious technologist, that's the same thing, right? So someone who's curious about technology, and they are curious about the business, someone who's curious about the business and knows some technology, what they are able to do is program what needs to be programmed, and they don't need to have a full-time business person babysitting them. And that full-time business person doesn't understand the technology. So then the relationship gets really frustrating, right? You've got a person who's using Excel. So think horses and buggies on a country road. And you got a guy driving a Porsche. Okay. And the guy in the Porsche is saying, well, where do you want the radio? And the guy in the horse and buggy is saying, radio, what's a radio? And the third time they say, what's a radio? And the guy says, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just put it to the right of the dashboard. They stop asking the question. And so now you've got this car that makes no sense because, but it's the requirements, but you gave me requirements. I didn't know what requirements I was giving you. And then they're written in weird language, right? So that whole process that was established, I think, to support, right? Why did we do that? We did all this requirements gathering and documentation and everything so that you could have one person writing requirements and we could throw the programming at any trained monkey, so to speak. No offense to any of you guys, to write code. And if you just cut out that whole thing and you take someone who knows what needs to be done, give them some broad context, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I know how to drive a car. Let me go around the block. They'll just get there much faster. And so, in my experience, a person who's writing code 30% of their time, who's willing to write code, will outperform a full-time programmer every single time.
Thank you for that analogy. I want to make sure I go over to some of the anonymous questions as well. And I see someone asked earlier, what do you think are best practices for teaching people statistics? I've seen either not real world, too simple, or too theoretical, not convenient, is what they said.
So I used to teach math and statistics at the university level. I think that for each statistical concept, you need to have a very simple canonical example. So let me take an example. What's the average, right? So what's an average? Well, it's a physical measurement. I'm looking at my crochet hook, and if I put my finger here, that's the average, right? There's half the amount of weight is on each side of the crochet hook. I'm assuming you guys can see my thing, right? So now I know what an average is. So if I then say, well, you know what, if I have this crochet hook and I've got a long tail, meaning I've got data all the way out here, it's clear that my average is then going to get pushed, right? My scale is going to get pushed down. So you need to have a very simple explanation in your head. Then you can look at, what does the data look like? I'm a firm believer in open up a tablet pad and actually do some math by hand a couple times with some small numbers. That's really helpful. And then so there's how to actually perform the statistical tests, and those are relatively straightforward once you get some examples. Like a standard deviation is number of average deviations away from where you are. Like how far are you from a center of mass, for example. But you really need to bring in data and then exercise it and plot it. There is no data there's no statistical analysis without a data plot. And if you plot all of your data and then run your statistical analysis, the data will make sense, or if it's wrong, you'll see it. So start with a simple example. Always have that simple example in your head, right? What's concave up in a calculus problem? Well, it looks like this, and that's concave down. And then you can figure out if it's x squared or 2x, its second derivative is positive or negative. You can recompute the second example and regenerate the rules. I don't know if that answered anyone's question on how to learn statistics, but and then find data sets that mean something to you, right? If you're into sports, do sports. If you're into woodworking, do woodworking. Find something that you can understand the data, because the problem with statistics is not the computation, it's understanding the underlying data. And if it's something you care about, then you'll know about it. You know, what's an average height for a horse jump? I'm sure my daughter would know what the answer to that is. I would have, I could come up with 6 meters and be like, that sounds a little high. And she would tell me, yeah, it's high.
So I know we talked a bit already about business background. And so for someone on the call who's perhaps an aspiring data professional or trying to get better at this, how would you recommend acquiring the business background needed to help them succeed?
Yeah, so the first one is be curious. Be curious, be curious, be curious. Most of you guys, I am guessing, because most smart people were like this, asked a ton of questions when they were kids, right? Raise your hands. You asked tons and tons of questions, and around 5 or 6, you were told to stop asking questions. You were in school and there was no time to ask your teacher a million questions. Is this true? Thumbs up. Give me some. I'm used to some feedback, right? Yeah. Okay. So go back to your 5 or 6-year-old brain and ask questions and ask questions and ask questions. Go find someone in your business calls who seems to be interested in the data and say, hey, can you explain this to me? Can you tell me what's going on? Would you walk through it with me? It turns out that business professionals are the same as data professionals. Almost anyone will do anything for a free cup of coffee. And you can do that over Zoom. Send them a Starbucks card over Zoom and say, hey, can I pick your brain for a cup of coffee? And here's whatever, I don't even know what Starbucks costs now. It's more than $5, but whatever it is, right? Can I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain and ask questions? And then at the end of that, ask who else you should talk to, because they'll give you a list of other people to talk to. So just build a tree of people to talk to. But the most important thing to do is after you finish taking someone's 20 or 30 minutes and decide how long it's going to be and end the call at that time, ask them at the end of that call if there's anything you can do for them. Chances are they'll say no, so it's a cheap question to ask. And if they don't say no, then you're helpful to them, right? And they will never forget you, because almost nobody asks them if there's anything that you could do for them, and then send them a thank you note.
I love that.
Right. So just basic stuff your grandmother would have told you, maybe.
Why is it so hard to ask for people inside your org for their time? I feel like it's easier outside for some reason.
Yeah,
Like,
I have VP level people in my industry outside of my corporation who will give me time faster than my current management.
oh boy.
I think there's two reasons. One is that the fear of asking someone in your food chain, right, and who's senior to you, you feel like there's a risk to your job, right? Is it safe to ask a question? And if you go outside of the organization, you don't have to worry about psychological safety, because who cares, right? If they think you're stupid, or don't know what you're talking about. But that's, again, it comes back to, you just have to learn to ask, because if you don't learn to ask the questions, then you're never going to learn the business, and you will be always competing against someone who programs against a spec. And we all know that people who program against a spec are not very expensive typically.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I feel like it all comes back to curiosity.
It's curiosity
Yeah.
and bravery, right? You have to just be willing to ask questions. That 5-year-old you, what is it they said? I had someone said to me, no 2-year-old ever, a year and a half year old, I don't know. In my family, we walked late, but no 1-year-old ever said, oh, I fell down 10 times. I guess I just won't learn how to walk.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that there's a little bit of work that has to be done to cultivate that mindset. And there's a Slido question that is really in line with this. I'd love to ask it. So it says, your bio mentions that you create innovative solutions. So do you have any particular tools or methods that you can recommend to help stimulate creative thinking, or I would say stimulate curiosity?
Yeah. So let's get some my other side topic that I love talking about, which is productivity. The first thing I'm going to tell you guys is get 8 hours of sleep at night, preferably consecutively. Get some exercise, and do not work more than 8 hours a day on average. You will not be creative if you're constantly working. And the way you get creativity is to stop and do something else. So I have solved more math problems or other types of problems learning woodworking. Over COVID, I learned woodworking. And one of my biggest first insights was my daughter, 7 years old at the time, looks at me and says, can I use the power tools? She had brothers. For some reason, no one had offered to let her use a power drill before. And I was like, whoa, if my daughter doesn't know how to ask for something, I wonder who on my team isn't asking for anything. I went back, and it turns out no one on my team was asking for anything. So we had a lot of conversations about, okay, ask for opportunities. What does it look like to ask for an opportunity? Are there ways to set up the power tools so you don't hurt yourself? The answer is sure. We can put safe guardrails around asking. But the number of things that you can learn by doing something else, and in particular doing a physical, I love making things, because there's nothing like making something to get your brain wired differently. Some people like gardening. I don't, but like making stuff, painting stuff, solving problems, it just gives you a space to back off. And then you've got something you've accomplished, which is also really cool. It's really hard to show that you've done something in a knowledge job. But at the end of the day, if you finished a floor, you've done something.
I
And
can
I have
relate to that so much.
On YouTube, someplace I have a whole thing on creativity that I did with I worked with a creatives coach. And so you can just Google me, you'll find it with Julie Geller. I worked with a creatives coach. It was great. Just what's the creative process? Huge improvement. But the biggest thing with productivity is to stop, take breaks, don't do anything. And that does not mean doom scroll and scroll on your phone. Like shut your brain down. If you're scrolling on your phone, you're not stopping. You're running on idle and getting nowhere. You're just burning gas, creating fumes, and getting absolutely nowhere. So you need to just stop. At some point in your day, you have to say, I'm done. I'm done. I've stopped. Read a book, crochet, talk to a kid, play pickleball, whatever it is that you do, walk around the block. You'll be way more creative the next day than if you work through a problem.
That is fantastic, fantastic advice. And I can really relate to that feeling of going, I don't feel like I've done anything today. I had a bunch of meetings. I have no physical product to show, right? I didn't refloor the living room.
So yeah,
I didn't build a shelf.
Yeah, let me give one more thing to do though, is pick your optimal time of the day. And I hate to tell this to everyone who's not a morning person, it's first thing in the morning for most people. Pick an hour and a half, get on a tool like FocusMate, decide what you're going to do, and think for an hour and a half. You will get most managers do less than 11 minutes of work an hour. So if someone's done the math, you can do an entire month's of work in one day with these power site focus sessions, and it's 75 minutes. No one can focus for more than about 90. So a 75 minute power session of, I know exactly what I'm going to do, shut off everything on your screen except for that and focus on it. Then you can go do the meetings because you've already done your day. If you do it after your meetings, you won't get anything. You can't get any thinking done because your brain is like going, ugh.
As you're saying this, Nechama, I'm like bursting. And I'm sure, I know JD Ryan's on the call. She's probably thinking, she just mentioned FocusMate and Libby's going to talk about it. I love FocusMate. It's my BFF. If you don't know what FocusMate is, it is a platform where you can get on and you're paired with somebody to just work for a period of time. There's 3 different
on video. Yeah.
You're on video, you check in, you say, here's what we're going to work on. Then you go on mute and you work on it and you come back and check in and you get 3 free sessions a week. If you sign up, you don't have to pay for it.
It's like $10 a month. It's super cheap if you pay for it.
It's not a lot. Yeah. So I'm going to throw my endorsement out there for FocusMate. There are several other platforms like that, but I see Curtis has a really great question and I would love him to ask it. Curtis, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Howdy. So this is a bit personal experience, but it also feels like a pretty universal experience for people who work in analytics and like applied stats, that sort of thing. So can you talk a bit about your experience with strategies to help data science teams make a big impact across the org as they share their work, right? So the kind of the way I like to frame it is you get asked, by business leaders to do all this work. Or maybe you discover something interesting and you're like, hey, this is like a really good thing and I want to share it with another team or with leadership. But then it feels like you sometimes just toss it into a void. So based on your experience, what are good strategies to share? Yeah.
So a 20-minute presentation should have no more than 4 slides and shouldn't have any Greek on it at all. It probably shouldn't have any algorithm names either. I hate to say that, right? I've sat through a lot of presentations where people's goal is to show how smart they are. Your goal is to show how relevant you are. So I talked about business context. There's business context. There's this cool data integration stack, right, which POSIT sits into in my environment. And then there is seamless integration. So you need to take your business problem, your cool tech that you've solved, and then show end to end how it changes how the business does its work and how it has impact. And you need to go way to the beginning and way to the end. And you need to talk in terms that senior leaders are going to understand: cost, time, money, quality. And that's it, nothing else, right? Not cool AI models, not whatever. You can throw in AI every so often because everyone wants to hear AI, but actually at this point, anything that involves a mean computation is being called AI. So, right, I did a regression test, I did advanced AI. I'm like, go for it, right? But you need to frame it in that larger business context of what is the impact, and then how does it fit into a workflow? If people have to do, I just did this example for someone. I'm doing my job. I'm working. Okay, great. Now I have to go do my analytics, and I come all the way over here, and I'm doing something over here, and I have to come back. And by the way, I'm throwing data back and forth. You will never have any impact because there's so much friction that nobody's ever going to turn their back and go off in this tiny little corner and get it back to the bigger picture. So make sure that your work is relevant. And if it takes you twice as long to do the project, take it twice as long. So that's how you sell the project. But the way you do to have impact is you pick a project. So when I take over a new data science team, I go shopping. I talk to all my friends and say, what do you need help with? What do you need help with? And then I find the project that has the most impact with the easiest to get to data and the person who is going to work with me the most. So there's a great book called Cascades on how to drive change. And what he says is, I'll put it in chat right now. What he says is look, don't go worry about changing people who disagree with you. Go find your closest 5 friends. You get 10% of the organization to agree with you, 10 to 20%, and everyone's going to have to follow. They won't have any choice. So just pick the right problems and then pick your friends to work with. It's the mom test. Tell me what the mom test is, Eugene. If your mom can understand it, it's okay.
No, there's a product book about
Okay.
when you sell, if you talk to your mom, if you talk to a bunch of people that are too close to you, they're always going to be too agreeable. So the whole book is based on that problem, that if you go to people you know all the time, they may like the idea too much and not tell you the truth. So you have to go find a whole bunch of people you don't know.
Yeah, Cascade says you have to find people who will challenge you. And I'm not that much of an agreeable mom, my kids will tell you, but you have to find people who will challenge you and but who will listen to you. So I'm driving a change in my organization. I am not going to go to the senior managers who are in theory the most influential. I'm going to the senior managers who like me because they're willing to consider it. So yeah, you need to think about it, right? You need to pick your good friends are not people who say, yeah, you're brilliant. They're the ones who say, okay, but let's talk about it. Let's work our way through it.
Yeah. Thank you. So there was a question a little bit earlier in Slido, which was at Pfizer, I imagine there's a lot of data. So how do you go about finding trends in the ocean of data?
Okay. Data is not true by itself. Everyone's like, oh, the data will speak for itself. Have you guys all heard that? It's not true. They're lying to you. Data is only useful with respect to a question. So I walked people through the data lake this morning and they were like, where do we find data? I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, and I said, look, you guys should all be able to do this by the end of the year. And I could tell there's this look of horror on their faces, like, are you out of your mind, Nechama? I'm like, no, go pick a question. Have a business question, right back to that question, you guys. Have a business question. Hey, I wonder about, and then go find the data. And then go discover that the data lake has all the history data in it. So you have to get the current partition, right? If you ask a question and then go look for data, then you'll find something meaningful. If you just open up data and run an unsupervised learning thing, sure, you'll find something, but what you're going to find is that you're going to find correlations that don't make any sense. You're going to find that meat eaters have fewer children. That does not imply that meat consumption, that's how I always teach correlation. Go look up by country, meat consumption inversely correlates to the number of children people have, because the minute you educate women, with the exception of yours truly, they stop having children. And so meat consumption is a sign of wealth. Wealthier countries have fewer children per capita. But that does not mean that meat consumption is a contraceptive. So now you'll never forget what correlation means.
I was just going to say thank you so much for these examples because it helps me remember all of these lessons so much better.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who is trying to build these bridges between siloed teams?
Reach out to the most junior people and talk to them. Everyone wants to talk to the senior important person, but talk to the not important person. Talk to the person who doesn't say anything in the meetings or who says something and gets shut down. Be kind. Come up with ways to do favors. Buy people coffee. Send them Bravo cards or whatever it is that you do within your organization. Like, be human, right? Most people have stopped being human with the hybrid workplaces. We don't have to be face to face with anyone anymore. And just be nice to people. That's the first thing. And then be curious and ask questions and ask questions and ask questions. But if you go to someone and you see they're struggling in another silo, say, hey, you know what? I saw you really didn't understand this in a meeting. Let me help you. Can I help you understand where to find the data or how to do something? If you lead with an offer of help, almost no one says no. Almost no one's going to say no. And really, at the end of the day, I'm successful at Pfizer, and any senior person is successful at Pfizer because of my ability to get things done outside of the official process. So we file tickets because you have to file a ticket, and then we can't find some information. So then we call up Jen R. Mike is laughing because he knows who I'm talking about, and she fixes it. Right. And 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, I send her boss this letter that says, oh my God, she's the most amazing person in the world, because she is. And she fixes any problems I have. And then when my coworkers who shouldn't be calling them up first, call her up and waste her time, I stop that, right? Because I don't want to waste her time. And I'm like, you guys help each other first, right? But that's how you break silos. So it's all about the relationships. It's all about the unofficial relationships. It's not about your title. The person who can help you the most if you need to influence a VP is who? His or her admin. They will stop you from being able to see that person. If you piss them off, forget it. You're never going to see that person. Doesn't matter if you report to him or not.
I love it. Make friends with the gatekeepers, y'all.
Yep.
Make friends with the gatekeepers. Well, can we take a turn from people questions to technology questions and talk a little bit about your tool stack or your team's tool stack?
Yeah. So my team is sitting on top of a data lake that I believe is Spark, but I don't actually, Snowflake. I don't actually care where the data lake is because that original data source is being morphed. And we're sitting in Databricks. So we use Databricks to control our data, and then we attach it to Posset Workbench and Posset Connect with GitHub, Jira, Confluence, etc. around the outside. And that allows us a couple things. The first of which is the Databricks environment gives us access both to the very controlled data and read-only, and a read-write space that's common shared space, which is incredibly important because we will never have all of our data inside of the data lake, the official data lake. So that's just by the nature of the type of work I do. There will always be some data we're going to have to push in. We use Posset because it's qualified and validated in our environment. And because I work in a large company, I have to partner with my IT department, and I actually have my environment called SPAR, SPAR. I was in that kind of a mood that day. Someone asked me why, and I asked Vox for a bunch of ChatGPT for a bunch of names. We call it Vox internally. And so it's a streamlined platform for analytics and reporting is, I think, what SPAR stands for. And I have convinced my IT department to own and support that platform. So they own the Databricks workspace, the Posset connections, and the GitHub connections to the Posset. And then I use their SDLC, a modified version of their SDLC validation process. So I validate my own code, which is 1/10 of the cost and 100th of the time of having someone else do it. And now I've got a fully business-led, business-driven environment that's completely supported by IT, which is kind of like the holy grail. I don't know. I'm really excited I got to this place. I don't know if any of you guys are. I can't tell from the videos, but it's to get digital to think that they gave you the platform, IT to give you the platform, and then to be able to validate your own stuff. Before this, what we would had to have done is go to an IT department and paid them $100,000 per app to push it through a validation process and add no value. And so that meant that we couldn't innovate anything because an app that took 4 weeks to write cost 3 employees in India to validate. And I couldn't justify it. So we never validated anything. And now we're validating things left and right.
That's awesome.
It's partnership. So it's a tech stack with the process, with the validation process added to it.
I have another tech tool question. I saw Roy asked in the chat. Roy, are you available to ask?
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. Thanks for the talk so far. It's been great. So, I'm thinking about, the topic of the last 2 years, ChatGPT and all these other tools. And so I'm trying to think forward 5 years into kind of the modern architecture of a analytic team. You talked a lot about how you want to know the business problem first and then write the code to do it. I'm going to present this question as a little bit of a straw man, so I want to get your reaction. But, if I'm management, I say, well, I'm going to hire a business guy and then, the LLM is going to write the code for the business guy. And, as long as they can use ChatGPT, they can kind of write the appropriate code. And if you think about it from a budgetary standpoint, let's just say, data scientists are more expensive than people with like a business degree.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're statisticians here for the most part. We're kind of math and stats and coding first, then business second, versus these guys business first, math second, I guess. What's the missing link in the logic? What do the managers maybe don't understand about kind of that stats focus first?
Okay, so how far in the future do you think this is?
I mean, I think the improvement could be over the course of 5 years, 10 years.
Okay, it's in my environment today.
Right.
Okay, so let's just be really clear. Right now, I have business users who I put in front of Databricks. Now, I don't put it in front of ChatGPT. I put them in front of the Databricks AI assistant because it's tied to Unity catalog, so it understands the data, and it only writes SQL and Python. Writes a little bit of R, right? But it basically writes SQL and Python for us, and they can go and do exploratory data analysis. So that's the sad part of the situation, right? So the answer is the business people can go in and do it. The good news is that because the business people can go in and do that, they are able to frame what they need much better. So they can go in and build a proof of concept, straw man, MVP that gets them 80% of what they want, and it's not robust. Then I hand it to my programmers in India and say, here is my proof of concept MVP. Can you please show them how to write functional code, test-driven development, put unit tests, all that type of stuff into it. So I don't think the business is ever going to write, really strong, robust enterprise level code. I'm going to make a stab and say that most programmers I've met who don't fit in the professional programming space, and many who have, Mike has seen some professional programs written by professional programmers that look like computer science student code, right? It's like, can you write really strong code? But the real answer is that there is no flaw in that business logic. The people who are business last are going to have to become business first, or they're going to have to become deeply technical. And what I mean by deeply technical, my oldest daughter's boyfriend does algorithms, right? Math algorithms for finance, right? That's a deep technical stuff, right? Finance. I know people who write programming languages, that level of PhD level comp sci, sure, there'll still be a place for them, but just people to spit out SQL, no. And the good news, the good side of all of that, you guys, is that just spitting out SQL or Python is boring. Oh, would you please make a chart that does blah? And why didn't you make it green? And wait, no, I like blue better. And right, and reading 15 pages of requirements when someone could have drawn a picture. This is mind-numbing work. It's fun as an intern, maybe, because like I got to do something. But as you get more senior, it's mind-numbing. And so when you get mind-numbed, you end up going into management, which is even worse. Like that's not the answer, right? Because now you're just babysitting people. So if you can figure out, to Curtis's question, of what are the business questions that the business needs to solve, and help the business solve those questions, and throw a little technology around it, because guess what? That AI assistant that helps my business user helps you too. Nobody writes code as fast as an AI assistant, because no one can keep track of 17 different programming syntax systems and date fields and everything else. So use the AI assistants, embrace them, but embrace the business, because you know what is possible. So you're driving a sports car and you're talking to people in horse and buggy. You need to explain why they need that sports car. You don't need to drive the sports car. So that's what you can do, is you can say, hey, look, I can get you someplace so much faster. I can get you someplace without having to stop and feed the horse every 2 hours, or pick up poop, or whatever it is that they're doing, right? So it's an opportunity for the technologist to learn the business, to say, oh, guess what? I can do this. My IT consultants, I have a consulting company that works with me, and we were looking for some data about employees, which countries they work in. And he says, oh, there's an API within Pfizer that has employee locations. Cool. He just saved me a huge amount of trouble. He added value. You got to be the hero, right? He didn't write any code. He found the API. He sent it to us. We're like, cool, great, got a data source. Now we can be dangerous.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Roy?
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yes, I want to scare you, because coding is no longer a career. It never really was, and it no longer is. As soon as they started outsourcing coding to cheaper geographies, it stopped being a career for Americans. What Americans can do, and people in the West can do, is solve broad problems, or wicked problems. I brand myself as a wicked problem solver. It can solve socially complicated problems where no one quite knows what they want, and no one can write a spec, but you can put the pieces together and solve a problem. That's what we can do. And you add a little code as some magic around it, and now you've got impact. And you can outperform a programmer. I can outperform 20 programmers, because I can tell one person what actually has to be done, while the other 20 are still off running around in circles trying to get meaning out of data that they don't understand.
It's amazing how fast this time can go by sometimes on Thursdays. But I see there's quite a conversation happening in the chat off of your question, Travis. So I thought it might be good to jump in here with that if you want to go next.
And while he's doing that, I'm going to throw in some books, some links to some books that I think people should read.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Libby. And I want to be cautious not to drag us all down the rabbit hole of pharma-specific software environments.
Yeah, we're 20 years out of date, but yeah. I've worked in banking. They're only 15 years out of date. So, okay.
Sure. I mean, basically, I prompted this conversation happening in the chat by way of commenting that a lot of us, seemingly not at Pfizer, are still agonizing about the process of validating our work environments. I know there's a lot of work, good work in our validation hub regarding packages, but even just installing and maintaining R as a statistical computing environment, whether by way of Docker, or we're talking in the chat about Nix and other ways to do that. I was just curious if Pfizer has shared any of their experience, because what you described sounds like the dream world. Like let's have Workbench stood up and hitting Databricks and it's all validated. Awesome. Like, is there a place where I can lay down a bunch of money and just get someone to install that for me?
So let me clarify a couple things. Okay. So there is validating for risk-based validation. So validating against a particular risk. Okay. So validating against output from an app against a regulatory submission, Mike Smith and I actually solved for now like 2 years ago. So there's a methodology for that. Call us up. We can tell you what to do. It's not proprietary. It's just what it is. Validating for workflow, which is what I'm doing. You show reproducibility, repeatability, evidence of QC, that you're doing unit testing. So by the way, you guys, pharma believes that the be end and end all of testing is UAT with screenshots, right? This is not testing, right? So write the code the right way. It's not that complicated. But what I would say is, I was just asked recently about, how do you use open source versus not open source? Rachel, I would assume POSIT offers consulting services. I have no idea. That would help people build out these platforms. The principles of validation are say what you're going to do what you said, prove you did what you said you were going to do. That's it. Pharma makes validation complicated.
Sure.
And by the way, a manual process is not validated either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and then become good friends with your process and quality people, because that's what I did. So you get agreement from process and quality, and then you get agreement from your IT department, and you build the relationships. And in my case, what I had to do was agree to do all of my data in a space where the data could be shared. So none of my data goes to S3 buckets. My data is all inside of Databricks. And they're like, look, you play where people can reuse what you're doing. We'll help you stand up a validation process. So it's a negotiation, and it's not, you need to believe it's possible, and then you need to build the relationships.
That's really helpful. You do mention unit testing, which I'm curious about with regards to, I mean, I think a lot of us here know how to do unit testing for packages, for example, but what does a unit test for installing R look like? I mean, no, like R itself, because, I get this question from SaaS. How do we know SaaS is actually SaaS? And the same could apply to R. What do you do? Like run a regression to make sure that you get the right answer? Does that validate that R is performing as expected?
So in my case, my IT department runs the installing of packages and stuff. That's why I pay for POSIT rather than standing up my own environment. I'm paying my IT department to do that. Mike Smith, who's on this call, could talk to you forever about it. But I'm talking about unit testing for code you're writing, right? At some point, you have to assume that 1 + 1 = 2, unless it equals 11. And or whatever else 1 + 1 could equal 30 something, right? But yeah, just 9, I guess. I'm trying to do binary math. I should not do that live on.
Understood. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
And thank you, Nechama. I know you just mentioned talking with POSIT further about this, so I did just put that into the chat. If anybody wants to talk further about some of these things with our team in more of a one-on-one conversation, I put a link where you can always schedule time to chat with us. Just wanted to let you know it's all there.
Yeah, and what you guys have to know is that large pharma is using open source, period. End of story, done. So it's just a matter of finding your senior leaders to talk to the senior leaders of the companies that are doing it, get everyone to calm down. Mike just posted something, and move on. This is really, yeah. And then tell them the Wikipedia is just as accurate as Encyclopedia Britannica, right? There's a lot of data out there that shows that open source isn't so bad.
Awesome. And
all right,
there's
one last thing. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I don't have my LinkedIn link in here, but I think Rachel can probably throw it in. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll make an offer like this to 150 people, however many people on this call, and 4 of you will reach out to me. So I'm not worried about getting too many reach out. So reach out to me or anyone else.
Awesome. Rachel, another Rachel Udout in the chat also put in there that she's looking to talk about validating environments and wants to talk about it. So everybody get together for sure. Nechama, I wanted to ask you a question that we like to ask everybody, which is, have you gotten any really good career advice or given any really good career advice that you could share with us?
Okay, I'm going to give you heartfelt career advice.
Okay.
If you want to get promoted, manage up. Okay. If, on the other hand, you actually want to solve important problems, manage down. And the reason I say that is that your ability to solve problems is your ability to go get data from your peers. So managing down assumes your peer level. So take care of the people at your level, take care of the people below you, and they will take care of you back. It might not get you promoted, but it just makes for a better work environment. And I think more impact long term. So, and if you want to learn how to manage up, I can find you people to talk to. Just don't listen to me. Don't be blunt. Don't make anyone uncomfortable, right? But in order to innovate, you need to be able to have trust and make people uncomfortable and make people think differently. And if they won't think differently, then they're not going to innovate.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nechama. I've loved this conversation today. So many career lessons and advice shared in this past hour. Was there anything you were hoping to cover with everybody today, or maybe questions you were hoping to ask to others in the audience that we didn't get to cover?
No, I think I was going to talk a little bit about wicked problems, but those I can come back and do that some other time. And really, it's just a call to action. Learn the business, learn the business, learn the business. Once you've learned one business, it's like a programming language. Learning a second business is the same. They all have the same problems. They just change the nouns and a couple verbs. It's the same sentence structure. I've learned, I don't know, I've worked in everything except for supply chain in my career. And it's well worth coming up to speed in the business. Don't think of it as a waste of time. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We so appreciate you sharing all your insights and experience. I know you're in the Boston area, so hopefully I'll get to see you in person again sometime soon in the next few months.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for hosting this. It's important.
Have a great rest of the day, everybody.